Hello everyone, welcome to our Let's Play series of Trees Aren't Real. And the reason why trees aren't real is because what we call trees is a multitude of physical manifestations that are not necessarily the same one next to the other. Namely, we call tree two different types of tree. No, let's not start with that. Let me not ramble about that right at the beginning of the episode. Last episode I was rambling, and in this episode I can't explain myself any good at the best of times, and this guy is pumping us full of such nonsense, such precious pearls like true death, he said, is the end of existence. And then immediately after he said, but you don't cease to be. He might be sort of tangentially touching on actual philosophical subjects, but he just sends me on rambles, and I'm not going to do it this time around. Because otherwise we're just going to be here forever. He's talking about Origin, and not the Electronic Arts storefront. No, we'll get to Origin. And what are these unbearable vibrations? What happens after that? Old books, they all describe it differently. Some focus on its material aspects, others on its immaterial one, but what they all agree upon is that it concerns the entirety of you, your whole existence, your body and your essence. They also agree that true death, no matter which form it has been explained through, is unbearable. The records hardly agree then. How can you be so sure what you concluded is the truth? It is foolish to only rely on empirical certainty, for it is rarely available. The truth of things, especially those we cannot measure or quantify, lies in coherence. Reality is deceptive, more so due to our imperfections and the imperfections of our senses. Thus, none of the old books are without false observations and deductions. But once you look at all of them, the falsities, vein, and the intersection of human thought can help us glimpse into the fundamental qualities of reality. For even humanity recognizes its own essence to some degree, but it often ignores it. Believe what I say or don't, fine with me. I'm just trying to give a truthful description of something I deem to be of supreme importance. But know this, you cannot strive if there is nothing to strive for, otherwise you're just stumbling pointlessly through the darkness of existence. Oh my god, there's literally 4, I was counting in my fingers. In these lines, there were 4 things that I was gonna ramble about. And one of them was like my favorite, and I didn't talk about it. It's not the trees, though. The trees is more to do with just, what we see is an abstraction, because we don't access reality. Anyway, I promise you, I'm not gonna ramble. If every death is a false death, and we will always be reborn, how do we know if we have died before? That's not the question that you should... Oh, don't ramble, Colonel. We can't know. We can't, because it would be necessary to look at ourselves from a perspective that would allow us to obtain the means to justify our belief that we have extended false death. And that perspective we cannot assume. I don't think so. I don't know if I died a false death before, or ultimately it ain't important. For when it comes to looking at the whole, there's no such boundary there at all, since it's a false death and hence not a death at all, and it did not happen before, nor is it about to happen, as time is just an illusion. If there's no way to know if someone died a false death before, then how do you know it exists? Don't ramble, Colonel. Don't ramble. I observed others, listened to those who have observed others, and read others who could perceive and understand what I cannot. False death is something beyond our senses, for it destroys them. That is one of its consequences, and that is why it fools us. As with many other things, we cannot rely on empiricism alone to give us the answer. We can, however, acquire the knowledge of its existence. Empiricism alone, perhaps, but relying only on things that by just making sense is a slippery slope. It's also the death of science. It's also that's not how it works. Because that's it's things that make sense. Like, you can make a fictional world that makes sense, and it makes sense. It's just not real. And yeah, as people, that's the basis of science. It's just, if you want the scientific method, you need to rely on empiricism. At the end, it's not. The thing is, the opposite of not relying on empiricism alone isn't to rely on empiricism alone. I said I wasn't gonna ramble. I swear to God. The opposite of not relying on empiricism alone is to rely on empiricism as a measure, rather. At least that's what the scientific method works like. You can have a rationale, you can have a thing that makes sense, but if you don't test it, if you don't put it to practice, it's not scientific. That's why maths, for example, isn't science. Maths aren't science, they're a tool. And, you know, maths is the realm of... maths are so incredible because they, like, you know, mathematicians anyway, they spend years and years of their careers and just studying and studying and studying on things that, while they can be very beneficial to science because, you know, they develop new mathematical methods and new techniques and stuff like that, they're not actually any discoveries in the sense of like they don't, mathematicians will not magically figure out how the universe was created just by doing calculations without data. You know what I mean? Because it makes sense, but it's the application of maths that works. So yeah, and how do you apply that? Through empiricism. And if you can't, which is the case with the thing that I was rambling about last episode, about that dinner at 10 years of age, then you always need to acknowledge that it could be wrong. And that's why reality is an illusion, because you could have a false death, or sorry, a false death. The game is getting to me. No, you could get a false memory. You could be a. There's plenty of books about this subject. You could be a robot that was just implanted with the memories that you have, and you could remember your entire life. And just having been born a robot 2 days ago or something like that. I keep going back to the robots, but it's a beautiful metaphor because it works very well for us who are used to listening to, you know, made up worlds. Because, you know, it just fixes so many issues. If you just, no, we're robots now. Let's think about it as robots because it works. You know, it's a thought experiment rather than, you know, it's a thought experiment is what I mean to say. But I swear I'm still rambling. I can't believe it. Anyway, the point is, yeah, this line over here. The true answer lies in wisdom, for it encompasses these crucial things: experience, knowledge, and the capacity to understand and reconcile the former two in order to form new knowledge. From wisdom also inevitably emerges humility, which evicts the childish arrogance and does the mind into a fertile soil for understanding things supreme. For knowledge is, in simple terms, a justified true belief. Yeah, you're adding a lot. It doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't need to be true. I mean, a true belief, I mean, if it is, it truly is. It's just, the true is redundant there, but I think this is a reference to something. I'm rambling again. Knowledge is just belief, for sure, in the sense that we can't ever know anything for sure. That whole all I know is I know nothing. Who said that? And how did they say that? Because I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, I don't actually know how it's said. I don't know if it is said like that. But yeah, you can't ever know things for sure because of what I just said about you could have false memories. You could just be being lied to in your sources for knowledge. You could have, like, it could be all a big what's that show? Truman Show? Yeah, it could be like that. So if it is a true belief, or is it really a belief? If you really believe that you know something, that's what we call knowledge. But again, and I think more importantly, because of the way this conversation has been going, knowledge is an illusion, because you never really know. And I say this because before he said time is an illusion, and I said, no, time is the illusion. It's the illusion of something. And we have a very detailed understanding of what that something is, but it's also not 100% understood because it involves gravity, and it's very complicated. Anyway, he continues, falsities can be believed, but not known. No, they can. They can answer that. That's actually how. That's the point of that. Justified true belief is knowledge. That's the point of that definition, and that's why I said that I think is quoting somebody, or the writers more appropriately are quoting somebody or referencing something here. The definition of knowledge, or it's not even the definition of knowledge, but just sort of putting knowledge in those terms is a way for you to understand that you can never really be sure because it's just a belief. And he says falsities can be believed, but not known. When he immediately before that says that belief is knowledge, or rather vice versa, knowledge is just belief. So I don't think the writer knows what the heck they're talking about, because this text takes itself super seriously. It's not the text where we're not seeing a madman being depicted as a madman. We're seeing a madman, period, but it's being depicted as somebody who takes themselves very, very seriously. And I don't think the writer is aware of what this is. This knowledge is belief, and then immediately saying that belief is not knowledge, or cannot be knowledge, rather, because, something being, knowledge being belief doesn't mean that belief is knowledge. Belief could still be belief and not be knowledge, but the thing is that all knowledge is belief. It doesn't mean that all belief is knowledge. That's one of the logical, it's not a fallacy, it's one of the logical, it's the other thing that's not a fallacy. The opposite of a fallacy, what's it? Logical, I don't remember. I remember having a course on, not a course, like a class on this, but anyway, the point is, immediately after, it's just contradiction. But I'll push on, and I promise you, I did not want to ramble. But I think it's good. The ramble hopefully the ramble is getting better, because I did cut a bunch of it from I didn't cut it, I just didn't say it. Anyway, falsities can be believed but not known, and as they are by definition false. Thus, knowledge requires truth. Truths that are not believed also cannot be known. For how can you claim to know if you yourself do not believe? Thus, knowledge requires belief. But belief is something, even if true. Belief in something, even if true, is not knowledge. For without justification, it might be a guess, blind luck, and that is not knowledge. Thus, knowledge requires justification. Where does justification come from, you ask? He chuckles. That is something we can debate till our descent into the center, kid. But I can tell you where it doesn't come from, and that's from profane quantification, the reduction of confines of what is available to the senses. That's not what quantification is. But also, yes, it doesn't come from that. Yeah, I was gonna say that specifically doesn't come from science. Science doesn't explain. How should I put this? You need to talk about it in specific terms. Science is the search for an explanation. But in that search, it never really does explain. It explains models that we can apply to reality, you can keep you can always keep asking why. So, while it does explain how things work, for the justification, because he's putting it in very ethereal terms. He's saying that it doesn't come from quantification. Yes, it does. If you know that 1 pound of flour, quantification, 1 pound of flour with a liter of water makes a cake, and you can explain it, it's just, it's flour and the cake. That's the explanation there. That works. But the problem is, how good is an explanation is up to you. You can always keep asking why. And if you ask, why does a pound of flour and a liter of water make a cake, then you're going to need to get into the chemical reactions of flour and the chemical compositions. And then when you get into that, you're going to need to ask, but why does chemistry, why is chemistry like this? Like the ions and what, I don't actually know how cooking works now that I think about it. I assume it's just chemical bonds made out of probably, I don't know, oxygen a bunch, maybe, and carbon. I don't know. There's a bunch of ways to making bonds, as far as I'm aware. I was 15 last time I studied chemistry. I Although I have read some other stuff since then. But the point is, then you ask, why do chemical bonds work like that? Why is it not something else? And that's where science stops, because you never, like, if you look at the sun and you say the Earth goes around the sun, and you have all these methods of explaining how that is and why that is, you're never gonna ask yourself, why is it like that? Like, for example, why does gravity actually, that's not a good one. I was gonna say, why does gravity pull us and not push us? Actually, gravity, according to our latest models of quantum physics, actually does push us rather than pulling us. But that doesn't matter. It's just it's not semantics. But anyway, like, for example, why does light travel at that speed? For example, actually, that's a beautiful question, because that one has an explanation. But you can ask, why does sound through air travel at that speed rather than another way? Huh, now that I think about it, actually that one might have an explanation. I keep thinking of I'm too dumb to know of questions that don't have an explanation, but real scientists, unlike me, can ask you questions, can say questions that are just impossible to explain, because, you know, that's just how things are. You know what I mean? When you get to a point where that's just how things are. The sun, the Earth doesn't orbit around the sun because that's how things are. There's a bunch of explanations for that. There's a bunch of phenomenons and a bunch of like laws of reality or laws of physics that explain that. But the reason for those laws of physics, they're not explainable. And at the end of the day, the reason why those laws of physics, and also, by the way, all of this that we're talking about here, all this, how do you know? At the end of the day, the reason for the laws of physics isn't anything, because the laws of physics aren't actually real. They're just a simplification. And we can never know they're real. We can never know they're correct, I should say. The laws of physics that we make, the laws that we simplify, we can never know they're fully correct, because because, you know, that's not how science works. Science only disproves something, never really proves it. So you can spend all of your eternity just trying to disprove a law of physics, and you're never going to really rule out any possibility. Or you're going to rule out a bunch of possibilities. You're not going to rule out all of the possibilities, because there's always more ways to think about how something could not work, or something could be wrong or incomplete. And that's how science evolves. But there's never a question as to why is it like that, in the sense that the law isn't written. And we didn't find the law in the bottom of a cave and be like, oh, look at that, I guess that's that. You know, we just sort of came to the conclusions of the laws and simplified our knowledge into a law, or into a whatever, theorem and whatnot. Let's return to this later, but I'll move on to different things. Did I ramble about all the things? Spirit of gravity. The term was inspired in large part... I think the other one was already asked. The term was inspired in large part by certain old books. The scientific term gravity is familiar to you, a force by which objects with mass attract one another. But that's a very limited explanation of what gravity is, but I suppose that sort of works in certain contexts. But spirit, that's something entirely different. Yes, you could call it the other words. Why don't you call it Ken? Why don't you call it, I'm trying to think of other words for it. Soul. Soul is another word for it, even in English. I mean, I guess Ken is English as well. Because spirit, spirit, you know, it's a thing that we say. It's like ghost and shadow, and I guess shadow is more of a physical phenomenon that we can observe, but it can be applied as a literary, it can be applied as a literary mechanism, which is what spirit is at the end of the day. Essence, he said this word before, which is another word you can also use. It's all interchangeable. It all depends on, like, if you make a philosophy or make a religion that says essence is this, your soul is this, your Ken is this, your spirit is this, your ghost is that. All different things. It works. I mean, it's just a religion or a philosophy or whatnot. But anyway, That implies the vital quality of something. Spirit ain't that. He does? Okay. To me, spirit is an immaterial property that brings something to life. It's like a spark. Yes, a spark that ignites fuel in an internal combustion engine of a ship like mine. Yes, let's take a ship as an example. You have the hull, the engine, all the internal components. You can add fuel and oil and everything else you need. You can have all the elements in their place, but the ship will be nothing but an inert piece of metal floating on the water. For that ship to move and be, it needs something to breathe life into it. A spark. Oh, so it's like the heart. Right. The spirit is the heart. It's beautiful. Beautiful text over here. Not really. I mean, this one is not. I don't mind this one over here. It's just that he's a dummy. Only the spirit. Oh, he says only the spirit is something of a higher order. Does not cease to be after giving life, but persists and further drives its carrier's existence through action. Yeah, you're just saying things. What about the ghosts then? So basically an immaterial force which gives life to something and makes it move. Yes. Therefore, the spirit of gravity is something that is immaterial in essence, but has a physical manifestation of a downward pulling force, like gravity. I suppose he could be talking about the laws of gravity. The spirit of gravity is just the laws of gravity, except the universe doesn't work like that. Again, as I was saying, the laws come after the physical manifestations. Not the physical manifestations don't happen because of the laws. It's the other way around. Then actually, that is understanding that is very important. Some people do get that confused. I've heard an analogy for rain I've heard an analogy for rain that perfectly encapsulates why it's important to understand that laws come after the physical phenomenons and rather than the other way around. I guess you could say like the rain falls downward, and you can say that's a law. In simple, very simplistic terms, you can just say rain falls downward or a little bit sideways if there's a lot of wind. And just say, okay, kids in like primary school or whatnot, rain falls downward. That's the law that we're gonna learn about. Okay, and they learn that. But if a kid asks, why is that law like that? Why isn't the law not the other way around? What would happen if the law were the other way around? And you ask that, those questions don't make any sense, because the law is an observation, and that's at the end of the day what science is. So let's return to this later. The origin. I have observed the decline of humanity. Its slow but steady descent. If we have sunk from the surface to the underground, then what higher position did we occupy before that? I kept asking myself that question repeatedly for years, looking for records from before the surface. Yeah, that's not something the game talks about a whole lot. And you found none? Actually, I found many. I read about celestial space, about the surface from which those who came before us fell from a higher place and higher state. They became heavier and they fell down. That's not how gravity works. You don't fall. I guess, well, actually, there's such a thing as surface tension and other physical phenomena as well that makes you fall if you are heavier, but that's because something is giving way. It's not that you're gonna fall all of a sudden. If it's buoyancy, it does. Buoyancy does. He was talking about floating, which is what buoyancy is. So if you're in the water and you weigh like a pound, if this weighed 1 pound, it would just be there. But if it weighed a billion tons, it wouldn't, because the surface, the displacement of water and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, but not even that celestial space from which they fell is the origin. It is far too close to the surface. Too close. Origin is higher above, among the stars. It is where one can achieve complete weightlessness. Origin is complete weightlessness. So, and by the way, weightless. Am I right in saying this? Yes, I am. Weightless particles can also be affected by gravity. But I might be wrong on that, because I'm talking obviously about light particles, which are affected by gravity, as we know from observing the light distortions on very strong gravitational fields from planets, from especially black holes. They're easier to, well, I say they're easier. I'm not really sure. They are theoretically easier to observe, but black holes are very far away. I don't think they are necessarily easier from a pragmatical standpoint. Or from a practical standpoint, rather. But light doesn't have any weight. The light particle travels at the speed of light, because that's where the definition comes from, and that's why it's called c. It's a constant because the time depends on the speed of light. So you can adjust. You can't adjust the speed of light in the sense that everything comes from it. So it doesn't matter what the speed of light is because there's no, like, it's kind of a funny thing. If you know what I'm talking about, it's funny to think of. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then I'm sorry, I can't explain it better. The point is, light particles do get affected by gravity. And also, and more importantly, or more interestingly, they carry energy with them. And that's why solar sails can be used. Light sails, not solar sails. Those are for solar winds. Solar sails, I mean, like in the sails of a ship. You can make a spaceship with. I think that we have a couple of those in space, just probes, you know, with the sails that are propelled by solar winds. I think those are what's called solar sails, but there's something called light sails, which are propelled by light itself. They're reflective or something like that, and then the light hitting the material accelerates the material, which is not necessarily very strong, as you might imagine, because, oh no, I mean, this light is too strong, I'm gonna fall over, you know what I mean? But it's a thing, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, you're probably gonna get a nice, lovely article about that. That's what I do. That's why I stay up late so often. It's just I keep reading about things that I have no understanding of and misunderstanding it, and then I come here on YouTube and make rambles. So this weight, I'm gonna ask, it's not only physical, is it? It must be some kind of burden we carry within ourselves. It is both. It is both. The weight which we carry on our backs and the one we carry within. This burden, it makes us sink to the center. In fact, our very existence is like a constantly sinking ship from the origin to the center. All of us share the ride, but the ship is tilted forward. Tilted with some of us being on the higher end, the stern, some of the lower end, closer to the center, hiccup, and the rest somewhere in between. Yes, that is how things work. Some of us are sinking faster than others. How? But we're still on the same ship? Yeah, it's called spaghettization. Spaghettization? Yeah, spaghettization? Yeah, because the time dilation makes the ship stretch. If you can imagine the same, you know, it's basically the front of the ship being faster than the back of the ship, that's what happens. You can say it like that, yes. Not the spaghettization. That's a real phenomenon, by the way. I'm not making it up. It's a real name, and it's what I don't think is true. I think it has been disproved, but used to be theorized as what would happen if you drove into a black hole, or if you just, you know, fell into a black hole. But I think it has been disproved since I learned about it when I was like 16. Let's see. We share our burden because what weighs the ship down is our combined weight. We may have our own burden, but we can help ourselves by helping others with theirs. That is the key. You understand, kid? I don't think I do. But I'm out of time for the day, so I'll try to understand next episode. For right now, I'm Colonel RPG, and this has been Underrail Expedition. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I really do. And if you did, or if you didn't, just leave a like or a dislike. Let me know. That'll make sure the next episode comes out sooner rather than later. But above all, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.